All right, technical difficulties, but we've got it figured out. Dennis, if you are in here and can hear me, I just found out how to resend you that link, so you should have it in your email now. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you for your patience as we're figuring out computer things. Welcome to Grounding Discipline and in Curiosity and Compassion. My name is Lindsay Lynch. I'm excited to be here with a group of expert panelists to discuss ways that they infuse compassion and curiosity into their work teaching discipline generally, and especially right now during the trying times of this pandemic. In a moment, they're going to introduce themselves and share a little bit about the lens and the experience they're bringing with them tonight. But before that, I wanted to share a short story with you to ground the conversation ahead. The story that I'm going to share comes from the work of Tara Brach. A person is walking in the woods and come across a small dog. The person reaches out to pet the dog, and the dog lunges at them and growls. The person's immediate response is fear and anger. Then the person sees that the dog's leg is caught in a trap. They understand what it might feel like to have their own leg caught in a trap, the pain and the fear this would cause them. And as they do, compassion begins to rise up in place of their anger. When we begin to see ourselves, our own pain, our own fear in the behavior of others, we create the space for compassion to rise up and for our immediate judgments to recede. A common misconception around discipline in schools is that when educators show compassion for misbehavior, that this somehow amounts to them condoning the behavior or being complacent in their practice or resigning themselves to a challenge that they don't think they can help a child overcome. This is far from the truth. When we approach misbehavior with compassion and curiosity, we see the learners that we serve as whole human beings, just like we are. When we see them as whole human beings, complex beings like we are, we're better able to know them more deeply and to begin to see where the behavior is coming from so we can better address it. So I invite you to keep the images in mind and heart that are with you right now in our conversation ahead. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to, or have our panelists introduce themselves to you. I'll start us out. My name is Lindsay Lynch. I'll be moderating this conversation today. I am an educational consultant and coach for the Center for Responsive Schools, or the home of Responsive Classroom. I first found Responsive Classroom my second year teaching, while teaching in international schools in Bangkok, Thailand. I also used this approach when I moved back home to the Twin Cities and had an opportunity to help found and lead a school. And for the last 10 years, I've had an opportunity to work as a consultant and share Responsive Classroom with teachers and schools all over the world. And I'm coming to you tonight from my home office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. All right, and let's have Amanda, why don't you start us out?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Stassen-Blevins. I teach second, third, and fourth grade English as a new language at a public school in Brooklyn, New York, where I teach and learn. I was introduced to the responsive classroom approach 8 years ago from a co-teacher that I was serendipitously partnered with, and that started me on my own journey. And I use the word journey very intentionally. I'm still very much learning and growing, and I think that's one of the really amazing things about the responsive classroom approach is that I'm learning as an individual as I learn more about the approach and as I learn more about this practice. And I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you. Carmela, why don't you share with us a little bit about you?
All right, hi everybody, I'm Carmela Pine. I am a 6th grade teacher in Fairfax County, which is in Virginia. I currently live in Alexandria, Virginia, but I am from Philadelphia. I've taught in a couple different states at this point and multiple grades, but sixth grade has been my favorite, and I don't plan on leaving them anytime soon. I've been working as a consulting teacher with the the Center for Responsive Schools, and I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of teachers and go to a lot of different places throughout the summer to teach the responsive classroom course. And what I always share with them is what I'll share with you right now is that responsive classroom has completely changed the way that I teach. I think it's changed the way that I look at education. It's changed the way that I look at kids. I don't know if I know I would not be the teacher that I am without it. And I'm excited to be here to share that with you tonight.
Thanks, Carmela. And Bridget.
Hi, everybody. I am Bridget Kelly. I'm the Director of School Culture and Special Education out in Gary, Indiana, at a charter school called Steel City Academy. Responsive classroom, like the other two, I got introduced to it some years ago while teaching physical education and health. And I just didn't understand what the approach was. I knew there was something about what I was doing, but I just didn't have a approach or a name behind it. So I attended a workshop 4 years ago, and it just changed the way that I saw education and the way that I viewed my students within education in an area where, you know, they say that those kids are underperforming and there's a stigma around our students. Became a consulting teacher 3 years ago, and it's definitely impacted and changed the way that I manage and coach teachers, the way that I interact with children and parents. And I think it's just definitely changed the way that I view education as a leader and a learner, and also how my students view themselves as leaders and learners as they journey through elementary school. So I look forward to this evening and sharing with you all tonight.
Thank you, Bridget. And Dr. Copeland, I see your profile picture now.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh,
I'm so
fantastic. Glad. Can you see me?
I can't.
You can't. Okay. I will work on the video, but in the meantime, Dr. Copeland, I became involved with RC about 28 years ago. I was a third grade teacher and started using some of the practices, fell in love with RC. 28 years later, 3-4 principalships later, I still use RC. I'm currently principal of Randolph Middle School, located in Randolph, New Jersey. I have been at that school for 8 years. We recently became a school to watch, the only school in New Jersey during that cycle. A very big honor for my staff. We are also a RC middle school. So we use the practices and principles of RC throughout our school day. After the school day, during the summer, it has become a part of who we are. It is a part of our identity. So I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I have been a principal for about 20 years now at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level. I love schools, I love working with children, and I love spreading RC whenever possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Copeland. Thank you for your perseverance too.
Yes.
We're glad you're here.
Yes.
So it is clear that our panel brings a diversity of professional experience and perspective to this conversation tonight. One thing that they all share that I can attest to is a demonstrated expertise as a practitioner of the responsive classroom approach. I also want to introduce to you an esteemed colleague that's here with us today, Michelle Gill. Michelle is here to help facilitate interactions among our audience and our panelists. She's asked me to share with you some tips to support your participation in this conversation. So one of the ways that you might want to interact with the conversation is by asking a question that you're hoping that panelists will address. If you have a question you'd like panelists to speak to, add that to the Q&A. You can find that on your toolbar, wherever your toolbar sits on your screen, and you'll see a little icon like the one on the screen. For all other communication, to interact with fellow audience members, to affirm ideas that have been shared, to share connections or new ideas, to share resources, all of those are great to add into the chat. Just remember, if you want a question addressed, put that in the Q&A, otherwise it can get quickly lost. We want to make sure that we capture that. And finally, before we begin hearing this great experience and expertise of our panelists, I want to acknowledge that while the conversation tonight does not have an explicit focus on equity, it is impossible to talk about discipline in schools without acknowledging how discipline intersects with issues around equity. And the responsive classroom approach addresses equity through its approach to teaching discipline, knowing that school discipline is one of the greatest promoters of inequity in our society today. We address this in our approach to teaching discipline through practices and through educators taking a non-punitive stance when it comes to misbehavior. We also have our teachers pay special attention to creating a safe and predictable learning environment, laying a foundation for positive and productive behavior and preventing unproductive behavior. RC teachers do this through being truly present, seeing teachers, by watching students and the community as a whole so they can notice and name the things that are going well, and so they can be present and knowledgeable as they respond to behavior that isn't meeting expectations. And when we are responding to misbehavior, we are very intentional about prioritizing the dignity of the learner, of the rule breaker in our response, knowing that our main goal is to get that learner back on track in a way that helps them stay there. And finally, we do this through being effective and reflective practitioners. So we are constantly, kind of like Amanda said in your introduction a little bit, constantly looking at what we're doing, evaluating it, figuring out what's working well, building from that, and then directly addressing things that need to be adjusted that aren't working. And so what I've just described also relates to the cycle for teaching discipline of responsive classroom that you see on the screen. And this is also the cycle that our conversation tonight will follow. So we're going to get started, and we're going to get started by exploring ways that we can lay the foundation for positive and productive behavior, and then also ways that by doing that, we're preventing unproductive behavior. And to begin, we're going to begin by considering our roles as leaders in the communities we serve. So I'm going to invite our panelists to share with an appreciation that self-care is the first line of defense for us working to sustain compassion and the energy that we need to be proactive teachers of discipline. I'd like to hear from our group, how do you prioritize your own care? And or what are some ways that you support colleagues in these efforts? So whoever be willing to share with us.
Okay, I'll go first. I was going to let the teachers, staff go first. Okay, so prioritizing self-care for self, it's always important that you have some type of hobby, something that you can just escape to whenever you need to escape, whether it's outdoor activity, whether it's scrapbooking, or whether it's binge Netflix watching. You know, you just need something to escape to. prioritizing for your staff and your colleagues, your teaching partners, that staff member who is next door to you. It's always important that you look out for them. You will often spend more time with them than you will with your own children or your spouse or partner. So it's always important to keep an eye out for them and to be honest with them when you see changes in their behavior, in their demeanor, or just things don't seem right.
Mm-hmm.
It's always important to speak to them about it and make them aware.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, take care of yourself with a hobby and take care of your colleagues, your neighbors, your staff by being there for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can see where I think sometimes, speaking for myself, I could feel like, oh, I don't really want to bug Carmela by like naming this. I don't know if she'll take it the wrong way. And as you were speaking just now, Dr. Copeland, I was thinking of how much I feel cared for. If someone says, hey, it feels like feels like you're feeling a little bit off. What can I do to help? It's a great suggestion. Some other thoughts.
Sure, I can share. So number one, make yourself a priority. I think, especially right now, just with everything that's going on, it's been really easy to bog yourself down with maybe what's going on in the news or worrying about your students, worrying about your families. But it is really important to make yourself one of those priorities and to make yourself your top priority. For me, I make a point, and I'm very fortunate. I've worked with my team and I have worked together for the past 4 years. So we know each other really well. And one of the things that I make really clear right away is I will be here at the beginning. I will be here from the beginning of school until the end, like the last bell. So my day ends at 3:30, but at 3:30, I'm shutting my computer and I'm walking away. My district right now is still all virtual. So at 3:30, when I shut my laptop, I really do shut my laptop for the rest of the night, and I don't go back to it until the next morning. I do that on the weekends as well. My outlet, similar to what Dr. Copeland was saying, is I like to work out. So I want to be outside. I want to be running. I want to be rucking. I want to be at the gym lifting weights. And when I go there, I let everything go. And that is my hobby. That's my outlet. So making that a priority first over everything else has been really key for me, especially during this time. And just shutting my laptop, walking away from the screen has been really important. With my teammates, just being honest about what's going on with me and what I need, and having those conversations and letting them know that it's okay if they also need something similar or if they need something different, that we just as a group have to share and talk to each other. Those boundaries, I think, have been really important. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, similar to both of our panelists, mindless activities has been something that's been very common in my practice now. Getting off of work and doing something that has nothing to do with the things that create stress sometimes. So education or my military career, it's mindless. So it could be going outside and shoveling the snow. It could be decorating my daughter's room or just sitting down, eating popcorn, just something that doesn't require my cognitive processing. Has been very important for me throughout this pandemic. Our school is kind of in a hybrid. We have some students in the building as well as some students at home. So it definitely, it's like we're running two different schools, so it definitely can pull on you. So mindless activities have been really good for me. As far as my colleagues, going back to RC, so we do morning meetings or opening circles, which it's like roses and buds and thorns, and it's nothing professional. Like we want to really tap into like, how is everyone doing on a personal level, as well as closing circles, weekly to end our week. And sometimes it's playing cahoots. It's just having a great time with one another, a virtual sip, just to like end the week and really stay fresh with one another and get out of the talking all about the professional side of the week, or, oh, the kids did this, or the test didn't go well here. We really try to focus on supporting each other personally through these structures that are really embedded in our day with our students as adults and leaders and teachers in our building. So I would definitely say, like, yeah, mindless activities, something that doesn't involve your cognitive thought processing and some way to connect some of the similar structures that you're already providing your students to your staff, because I think that's been very beneficial for us as we've been going through this now, like everyone since March. So that's what I think has helped us sustain our self-care and, you know, maintain our compassion and our energy for our students.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I echo what everyone said. I'm making myself go for walks so I don't get kind of bogged down. Going for walks every day, getting outside, getting some fresh air, having dinner without any sort of technology at the dinner table has been a big priority. I'm a new mom, so my child can now sit in a high chair. So that's actually a really great way to get entertained in a different way. The only thing I would add on to what people have already said is thinking about compassion for myself, particularly in this climate. This time of year, I expect different things, and this is not a typical year. This is not normal, and I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. And really trusting that relationships take time, and they might take more time this year because of a lot of the challenges that are happening, and reflecting on the things that are successful, the things that are going well. And for my colleagues, helping to celebrate that has been a big piece too. It's like, there are things that are going well. Your child can write an email. Like, that wasn't happening last year.
Right.
They're able to tell time and show up to the small groups on their own. That was not happening last year. Like, there's a lot of really great things that we can celebrate in small ways. And that sort of compassion can then sort of lend itself into the work with discipline with students as well.
Thank you. Absolutely. And so we've started looking at how we, the adults at school, we are the foundation of the foundation. So we began thinking about this with us and our colleagues. And next I'm going to have our panelists share, some of you started to speak to this naturally, but what are some strategies that you're currently using to ground yourselves or other students, families, colleagues in a foundation of community engagement? So what else we know that sets the stage for a safe, predictable environment where positive behavior takes the stage rather than unproductive behavior, or when we meet individuals' needs to belong, to feel a sense of significance, and to feel fun or a sense of engagement. So I'm going to ask our panel right now to share with us what strategies are you currently using to meet those needs for community and engagement? And then if you'd be willing to share, what have you noticed that you associate with your efforts?
Yeah, I'll go. I think this year we've definitely had to streamline like what RC structures that we wanted to focus on because we're virtual and we're in building. So I think for us this year, circling back to our morning meeting and our closing circle, those two structures have provided us the foundation to continue to build those relationships. It's that space that creates the predictability. It sets the tone for the day for our students. It's that time where they can be little humans and be themselves in their little pajamas on the screen, and getting prepared for the day and learning how to get prepared for a day and very independently, which works on those like social emotional skills or self-regulatory skills that, you know, our students may struggle with, you know, when they don't have that opportunity to practice those skills authentically. I also think that for us, that also is inviting to our parents, because what we have noticed is that this is the time we're interacting with our parents more than ever. This is like a teacher's dream, in my opinion, like access to parents daily, you know, so inviting parents to morning meeting, like they're very much a part of our share outs. They're very much a part of, hey, get in the chat, tell me what you did this weekend. And I've noticed that parents are more vulnerable and they're more willing to let us in versus keep the walls up. They're more willing to communicate when there's an issue that we can help try to resolve. So what I've noticed across the board is our connectivity with our stakeholders in general. And that's something that we hadn't had before the pandemic. So I just appreciate morning meeting and closing circle being a part that we all start our day the same way with our families, not just our students. And that has been a strategy that has helped decrease some of our off task and misbehavior, as well as parents helping us hold our students accountable and helping reinforce those skills at home. Like, hey, you have to be in your camera because, you know, you're in kindergarten and your teacher needs to see your little eyes so that they can help you if you need help. Like, you got to know how to share your screen so that they can help you work on your platforms. So now we've got this cycle that's complete with the other stakeholder that sometimes is not willing or not, they don't feel comfortable with helping and assisting. Now we have to depend on them. And that has helped, I think, us bring this foundation to a total head. And I think those two structures have been our stronghold, and we'll ride those things out until we can get our babies back in our building face to face. So that's what I believe has been the foundation of community and engagement is morning meeting and closing circle.
Mm-hmm. And Bridget, you talked so much about families too. I mean, I really sense like families are feeling a sense of community and engagement too, which is so powerful. Anybody else want to speak to that?
I'll add on to Bridget. The same, morning meeting has always been important for us, but I've found that in the virtual setting, it's become even more so. It has given us this opportunity, and I make it a point every single day that I want them to just have fun together. My students don't, I work in a Title I school, so a lot of my kids really aren't leaving their apartments or their homes a lot during the day. So the most interaction they're getting with other people outside of their family, and this is probably true for a lot of your students as well, is, you know, online in school. So we, having that same routine of morning meeting, which they've always been used to at our school, and then continue it in the virtual setting, and then adding this extra component of being at their house, and then including in our activities, you know, what's going on in your house. Like sometimes some of my kids, I have 6th graders, and sometimes they'll have their niece or their nephew with them. You know, a lot of times the dog is coming into the video, or, you know, the mom comes over and just does the quick wave and walks away. So that's been pretty special. And it has, I think, helped grow our community and made it a little bit more fun for everybody that way. I also use a lot of different energizers and, you know, games throughout the day. So every time we come back together, we do some sort of game or activity with each other. And interactive learning structures have been huge for us, giving kids that and offering a lot of choice, honestly. I mean, that's where I'm seeing the most engagement from my kids. Is I think this has been a really incredible experience to allow kids to make their own choices of how they're going to learn something or how they want to share their work.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of options of, do you want to write it in the chat space? Do you want to say it out loud? You know, do you want to have your video on for this? Do you want to show us what you're talking about? So I think that has been, and I've noticed there's been a lot of engagement. The more choices that they have, I do tend to get engagement from everybody, so.
Well, you're speaking to a lot of safety and predictability. There's always safety and choice. And when you said every time we come back together, we do an energizer or a game, those sorts of routines and rituals also play into safety and predictability. Carmela, would you explain just briefly what an interactive learning structure is for people that might not be familiar with that term? And then maybe give us an example of how you do that in your virtual platform.
Sure. So we utilize, I utilize breakout rooms and extra meeting spaces. We use Google Meet here in Fairfax County, which is where I teach. And an interactive learning structure is literally just, you know, setting up structures for kids where they are able to learn their content in a more active way. So it's not just me sitting here telling them about the regions of of North America, which is one of the things that we've done at the beginning of the year. Instead, it's, okay, here's this graphic organizer, and you're going to use these different video clips or these different articles to find this information. And then you're going to come back and you're going to share that with somebody else. Does that kind of sum that up?
That's a great example. Yeah, thank you. Amanda or Dr. Copeland, did you want to add anything? Otherwise, we can move into the next phase.
Sure. Just real quickly, at the middle level, there are 2 things that we do. Number 1 is advisory. And we found advisory to be very beneficial, not just for building relationships with children, but also with parents. So we will invite, prior to COVID, we would invite parents into advisory meetings, and they would be active participants in those meetings. And then after the advisory was completed, we would often have debriefing sessions with the parents to talk deeper about a topic and how it impacts them as parents. And we found those to be very, very beneficial. The second thing that we do are brain breaks. And with COVID and the virtual environment that we are in, I've had teachers move brain breaks from the building to the virtual environment. So they will do brain breaks with the entire class via Zoom or Teams. We use Microsoft Teams as our platform. And the teachers have found some benefits to doing that. And the students will often include their siblings or their parents also in those brain breaks.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I would also just add, we're doing a lot of grounding with hopes and dreams. In particular, I am an out of classroom teacher, so I kind of have a different sort of cycle with kids. I'm not with the same kids all day long. So it's particularly important when I have kids for maybe a 6-week cycle or an 8-week cycle, really grounding it in that work of hopes and dreams. To kind of get an idea of their motivations, like what are they, and getting to know their strengths and what they are interested in. And that is really helpful in terms of building that relationship, but also when we get to the end of the cycle, being able to reflect back on like, what steps did you make toward those hopes and dreams? Another thing too is going back to what some folks have said about like routines and procedures. I feel like because everything is feeling very new this year, it doesn't feel like it's in my skin like it was in person and in a different way. It was really in my heart when I was teaching pre-pandemic. And the routines and procedures, I feel like I'm still trying to get under my belt. And I know my in-person colleagues are doing the same as far as like hand washing, social distancing, like all of these things are like still really new for a lot of us. And so it kind of really brings us back to that idea of compassion for ourselves, and we're figuring it out one day at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as everything's new, I imagine that there are moments where like, oh, we need a procedure for that. We need to model that. We need to figure that out. Like we don't know what we don't know and what they don't know yet. Thank you for those.
Can I jump in with that? Because I think that was a really good point, Amanda, because I've noticed for myself, especially, that I have been much more cognizant of how I'm teaching my routines and my structures and procedures for kids. And I've really had to work at being very clear and very concise, because I don't get as much feedback in the virtual setting as I would in person. So that's been harder for me. And we're in the process of starting to move back to that hybrid. And from some of my colleagues that have been in the hybrid situation, they've talked about, how what they've been doing online has been helping them within the classroom as well, because in this new hybrid model, it's not stuff that we're used to. So it's incorporating that stuff that we were doing in the virtual setting back into the in-person with lots of new restrictions as well. And it's made me think a lot about how can I be concise and how can I make sure that I'm being just really, really clear in those directions and expectations.
Thank you for that. This is a great segue into us looking into the next phase. So we're constantly working to lay the foundation for positive and productive behavior, preventing unproductive behavior through predictability, through safety, through routines, through procedures, through clear expectations. And then we move into the phase where we're being that really seeing teacher, that seeing leader, where we're present and we're actively working to notice and name what's going well, knowing that one of the most effective tools for teaching anything, discipline included, is reinforcement. So next I'd like to hear from our panelists, knowing that that's a really effective teaching tool. How are you prioritizing your noticing and naming of what's going well for the people that you serve at your school?
I mean, some more. Sorry, Bridget.
Go ahead, Carmela.
I was sitting here looking and I was like, who's gonna go? Who's gonna do it?
Great.
Honestly, some days it's just, you're all here and you're on time today, and this is awesome. And it's just pointing out those little pieces, because and it's been said a lot already, like just having some compassion for how hard this has been, whether you're in person in a totally different way than you've ever been before, or you're virtual, or you're in hybrid, which is insane, right? So these are all new for all of us. So just, making a point to, I just try to kind of acknowledge that every single day, like, hey, this is hard and you're here. This is hard and you still did this. And yeah, like, just kind of acknowledging that just on a regular basis, has helped a lot. I don't know, Bridget, you can pick it up. That's the first thing I thought. I was like, yeah, you're here today. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. It's celebrating any win, right?
Yep.
Our expectations for students face to face are totally different than our expectations sometimes can be virtually. I mean, we definitely try to still hold a high bar, but it's definitely one of those, you're a kindergartner and you are sitting in your camera and you were still for 5 seconds, like thumbs up, everybody. It's just hyping up this environment because this environment is so abnormal for us, but for our students, especially our younger students, they don't know that this is a pandemic and that this is like abnormal, like a way of assessing their academics. They don't know. They know they wake up in their pajamas and they log on. So I think it's definitely celebrating and noticing the things that make what are the things that are making them show up every day, and celebrating and reinforcing, like, you got up, guess what you did today? You had to put your pajamas on, you got your computer open, like, oh my God, you're learning all these things, like you logged on, like tell me the things that you did to log on. Look at all those skills that you've managed to be you've mastered in this process. For my kindergartners, it's like, it's 30 of us here online today. We're all online. Like, let's celebrate. That's teamwork. So it's still like infusing our core value system in our school. And it's just celebrating that, like, any win is a win. And our wins may not look like A's and B's this year. But the win is, like, we are navigating this virtual space for the first time as a team. And for our parents and our kids, that is the win. And we celebrate. We have dance parties. We end our week, no matter what the data says, after any exit ticket, the real win is us together in this environment, doing this collectively and smiling and taking it with a grain of salt. And we're teaching our kids resilience and all these social emotional skills, perseverance, that when they come back into the building, what they will have is this sense of togetherness and a sense of team. And I think that's going to drive us back in our building. And that's the same for our kids inside the building. They're working on some of the same skills. They got masks on, they're 6 feet. They can rarely communicate without sounding muffled. So we're teaching them skills and we're celebrating, all of those things that they're doing every day, even though it's not what the end of the year measure says that we should be at. What we're celebrating is what we see daily, and it's a day by day thing. It's not a weekly. It's like, today we did this, like attendance. We're 95% attendance. Let's stop, cut the music on, and let's have a good time. So it's just celebrating the small things and reinforcing all the things that they're doing that they've never done before in this virtual space.
Yeah, that's so important. I think it's a good model for ourselves. My colleague Michelle Gill is really good at this. Just noticing, like, this is hard. It's hard right now. It's hard. I'm like, yeah, it is hard being a person and being seen, having somebody else acknowledge this is hard. It's hard work to get up and to log on and get your screen on. I know this, I do this every day. There's always some sort of issue, just like there was tonight. It's hard work. And I think that really establishes relationships and connectivity too, when someone says to you, hey, this is hard and it's okay. And I see you making it happen. I'm going to move us towards the other end, not the other end, but the other side of this cycle is when students are misbehaving. we need to respond in ways that are respectful and in ways that help them become successful. So thinking about those 3 questions on the screen, how have your responses to unproductive behavior changed during the pandemic? What has remained constant? And what seems to be working well for the learners that you serve? And Amanda and Dr. Copeland, I want to give you an opportunity first. Do any of those questions speak to you? Would be willing to share any thoughts on those?
Sure. At the middle level, this new way of teaching and learning has brought about some challenges with students using technology as a way to further bully, harass, and intimidate children. So we've had to rethink how we address student misbehavior, specifically with the use of technology, while at the same time showing compassion and consideration for everyone. So we have reviewed our school policies and procedures regarding use of technology. Language that may have been somewhat tolerated in the past is no longer accepted. And as a result of this pandemic, we really have been forced to look at how children are under pressure and how they are under stress.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of curiosity in that too, like curiosity, what in our policies, what can we change, and what's the root of this behavior?
Yes.
Yeah, I think things that have remained constant are definitely approaching misbehavior with a curious lens, with curiosity, empathy as well. Like if something is going on in the chat, my inside instinct is like, what is going on in the chat right now? But then to really come at it with more of a curious lens and asking, can you say some more about that? What do you mean? Also, like just thinking, what feels manageable to the kids? Like Dr. Copeland is saying, like they're going under a lot of stress right now. Like what feels manageable? What feels like a stretch? Like, is it a different way of participating? Is it, participating in different ways? I would also just add on to the conversation from before, because it kind of connects to this too, is like asking the kids what's going well. And I've done it enough that even when I forget, the kids often jump in and say, hey, can we celebrate something? Or something that's going well, I notice, is this. And it gives me a minute to reflect as well, and be able to think about that in a different way too.
I would agree with everything that's been said so far. I mean, things that have stayed constant for me is that I'm still setting the expectations for my students of what the behavior is, modeling for them what it looks like to talk in a chat. And like when Amanda was saying that, I was thinking that happened to me. And then I went, oh man, I didn't actually talk about when it would be appropriate to write in the chat versus when you have to stay quiet in the chat, or I just kind of sometimes make that assumption that we know, right? Another challenge here that I was thinking about specifically is when it comes to cameras, right? So right now I can't see any of you, but I can see my fellow panelists who all do a really good job of like looking at me and nodding as I'm talking, right? But with my students and with you, I can't see you. So I don't know if you're nodding along and following with me or not. I'm not sure if you're with me. I'm not sure if you turned this on and then walked away from it. So with my kids, we spent time talking about when do you need to have your camera on? When is it okay to turn it off? Setting that expectation for them made it easier for me to know when they were actually there versus when they were not. Setting up the routine, like we might do a bathroom break in our classroom. Like if you need to go to the bathroom in our classroom, here's what it looks like. well, if you've got to step away from your computer for something, here's what it looks like. Go to the chat space, type BRB,
Yep.
send, and I'll go, okay, so I know Lindsay stepped away for a second. And then when you come back, just type back. And now I know you're back. Having and setting those expectations. My kids, my sixth graders do not like to be on the video. One of our kindergarten class loves it. Like they're on the whole time. My sixth graders are like, eh. As soon as they found out that there were backgrounds that they could put up, that helped. Because then they would put they'd be in Mars or they'd be underwater and happy as clams, right? But otherwise, if they don't have to have their video on, they don't want to have it on.
Yep.
So offering that option of, okay, this is a time where you have to put your video on and then you can turn it back off. I think that has helped a lot, and that's been much different than in the classroom.
Yeah. There's so much developmental and individual and like cultural care here that I'm hearing in the suggestions that you're making as well. Middle schoolers developmentally are so, it's not even attuned because it's not even accurate, but they're so concerned what everybody thinks about them. And they're prone to believe the whole world is looking at them all the time. I mean, that's one of the first things I thought of when kids are going to school. I'm like, oh my goodness, that would be a nightmare for a lot of young adolescents because it's so risky. So really clear expectations of when your camera needs to be on, and then also some curiosity and compassion of like, yeah, you don't have to have your cameras on right now. It makes a lot of sense. So we're going to move into the final phase, thinking about how we evaluate. So we're going to give panelists an opportunity to share with us what's working particularly well and something you're trying to figure out. And I'm going to try to keep this to maybe like 3 minutes because we want to make sure we have some space for Q&A. So who will share us what's something that's working really well?
I think what's working really well, and something that we'll continue to do is to, it's like that idea of the parent partnership, our families, our engagement, continue to invite the families in, continue to help, like when we are building our routines and procedures, like getting our families involved in that process so that they understand how to reinforce those things. And that's going to continue to be like, my focus when you're thinking about building culture is building culture across our school and all of our stakeholders. Things I'm trying to figure out is how to empower our parents to ask those questions, to continue to be vulnerable in helping their students access the learning. I think it's still something that with our population, it's a barrier because of the socioeconomic status of some of our families. They may not have the education to know what questions to ask. So I'm giving them the space and the empowerment to continue to be vulnerable to ask those questions to help us build the foundation for our students is something that I still want to try to figure out for our families.
For me, something that's been working really well is prioritizing what live instruction is used for, and that's for interactions with each other. So I've got like a third grade group that has some free time where kids get out their stuffed animals and have full-on conversations as their personas. And it is a delightful part of my day, listening to kids bragging about their impersonation of Kermit the Frog. And that's kind of helping me to connect to this part about what am I trying to figure out. Something that I'm really missing from the pre-pandemic days is my favorite time in the classroom was observing free play. That told me a lot about what kids they connected with, what kids they didn't connect with, what kids they didn't, like if they kind of wanted to be that by themselves more, what kinds of activities they like to do. And, not having cameras on is a real impediment to that. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out as well. So having some time for that unstructured play time to get to know the kids better.
Yeah. This is Dennis. So one thing that has been working well is teacher language. And one thing that my administrative team and I noticed last spring was that teachers became more patient when they were dealing and teaching students that were online. Teachers, again, became more patient. They would restate information and directions more frequently than they did in the past. And they would also check for understanding, because when students are behind the computer and not physically in front of you, you need to make sure and ensure that the students understand what you are teaching them. So patience, restating, and checking for understanding, we found the teacher language to be more compassionate and more empathetic when they were working with children.
Thank you for that. All right, Michelle, we're going to turn it over to the audience. First, I want to start by saying thank you all. You've turned a very abstract concept of compassionate discipline into real life, actionable, achievable next steps that people could try tomorrow. So thank you for that first. And now, what are people wondering, Michelle?
Hi, all. So a couple of questions that I think we could fit a lot of the questions under these too. So one is in the in-person with virtual, or I'm sorry, in the in-person with social distance, or in-person where there's concurrent teaching happening. Questions around, so what's some language I might use? What are some things that I can do in the moment to approach misbehavior with curiosity as opposed to sarcasm or things like that? So I'll pause, let that, and of course those answers could work virtually as well, but the questioner was specifically talking about when you're in person, and you can't get as close anymore and things like that to have that proximity work in the same way. So I'll pause and then I'll do the follow-up as well.
In the moment, things that I know some of our teachers have done is, once you as the teacher notice and you have your noticings, like you just stop and hey, go through, you can use reminding language. So let's just stop. Everybody, remind me what we should be doing right now. For my virtual students, like what should we be doing with our pencils right now? For my in-person students, like what page should we be on right now? And giving them the opportunity to reset by reminding them and prompting them to get back to expectation, as well as envisioning for some of our older, maybe our middle age kids, envisioning like right now we're in our math lesson. Let's envision what we should be doing, what that looks like right now. And I think that's a very, I think, easy approach to helping students reset their own behavior, as well as them noticing that there was a reason why you stopped. And then you can give them that back brief of, I stopped because I just noticed that you all were not blah, 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 blah. So I just want us to be on the same page. So let's talk about what we need to be doing together as a team. And I think that typically will bring students back, and that's something that can be done in virtual spaces and your face-to-face spaces. Is going back to envisioning language and some reminding language, and then reinforcing that, look at us now, like we're all on the same page and all of us now have answered this problem correctly. Like that's what I'm talking about. Now we're ready to move on to our next problem. And just reinforcing that behavior once they have reset.
So I've been thinking about this. Again, I'm not hybrid yet. We're getting there. So I've been thinking about how I'm going to be able to do this. We're going to be teaching concurrently. So I'll have kids virtually and then, kids in person. So I think, setting that expectation of, this is going to be hard for all of us. I am a person who, when things start getting a little bit awry, I tend to try to make a joke with the kids and try to make it lighter, or I stop and I take ownership like it was me. And I'll say, you know what, something's not going right now. So let's pause for a second. Let's come back. So here's what we're going to be doing today. Here's our objective. Let's look again at how we're going to get there. As I think about the doing both of them at the same time, I think it's going to be, and some of you may have ideas about this too, and I'd love to see them. I think it's going to be about setting very clear expectations of, if you're on our virtual space right now and you have a question of something's going on, here's how I need you to handle it right now. Know that I will get to you, probably not right away, but I will. And if something's going on in our classroom space, here's how I need you to handle it. And again, I might not get to it right away. And then, just coming back to that whole idea of I'm going to come back over and over and over again with compassion and empathy, and just, this is really hard. and it looks like you're having a difficult time right now, why don't you take a minute and we'll talk about it later? Because you can do that whether you're right next to a kid or if you're in two different buildings. I can set up a breakout room with a kid and I can go there with them later. I can later on still have a one-on-one conversation in my classroom with a child too. So just that expectation of, if you have an issue, we can come back to it. Here's what you do in the moment. That's my thought.
Thanks, Carmela. Lindsay, the second question, Carmela both answers actually kind of touched on regarding, specific things to say and do in the moment anyway, because we feel like sometimes that our old tried and true logical consequences don't necessarily have a one-to-one correlation in this new context.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so what I can say is, and I put it in the chat for those who have a lingering question that you really want to have like a resource that you can be directed to or something like that, I'll definitely be on for a few minutes after, so you can feel free to stay and we can direct you in the right direction. And of course, any panelists are welcome as well, but we want to honor your time too. And I just want to turn it back over to Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about that our teacher language book would be helpful in looking at open-ended questions. And a nugget that I'll offer as we close, that no matter how frustrated you are, if you can look at a learner as a person just like you and ask like, hey, what am I missing? We're both working really hard right now and it's not working out. What can I do to be a better teacher? It's my most favorite question. What can I do to be a better teacher for you right now? What can I do to be a better leader for you right now? And if we mean it with sincerity, we're also probably mending some bridges or our relationship that is probably tarnished anyway because we've been frustrated with one another. So that's a question that I always like to share. And to close, I want to thank our panelists for sharing so openly and honestly and truly with our audience. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us and spending this part of your day with us. Thank you so much. And like Michelle said, we'll stay on for a few minutes for people that would like to hear a little bit more. Thank you, everybody. Good luck. Be well. Am I forgetting something, Michelle?
No, you have somebody who was in a Bangkok training with you that just said hello. So I wanted to make sure you said
hello. I haven't seen the chat at all. Hello.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a great evening. We're going to give people a moment to file out. And then go from there.
Dennis, thank you so much for your perseverance with this. The great thing is like your headshot on how I see it on my screen. Yes. It kind of looks like you're nodding along anyway. Your head's kind of to the side, so it's awesome.
Great, thank you. I don't know what happened. I'm going to blame it on Zoom.
Yep,
of course.
That's it. But at least you could hear me.
Oh, it's perfect. It's great.
Right.
All right. So for people who are going to remain on, we can spend a few minutes certainly sharing what I would say the most succinct version of an answer that we can to honor your time and also maybe point you in the direction of a resource. For questions that definitely feel more one-on-one problem-solving conference type things, I would definitely suggest, and I can go ahead and put my my email in the chat box to direct you to more an extensive kind of customer service type approach that way. So please feel free actually I would encourage you to consider your question, and if it is one that's going to be more of a one-on-one about a student particularly, we would want to keep them for more of a private conversation. Lindsay, do you see where like Angela has her hand up and we could allow her to talk? Hi, Angela.
Hi, good evening. I just put in the quick Q&A if we would have access to this webinar and also the chat, because there were so many resources that you shared. This is my first time to come to a responsive classroom.
We're so glad you're here.
Welcome.
I'm about 30 years late.
Never too late. You are some of my favorite participants at RC Stuff, is the people who have had so much experience. So welcome.
Anyway, so that's the main thing. If we will have access to the chat or be able to hear this webinar another time.
So you should be receiving a recording. However, I also want to I'll put in the chat to, you can always email events@responsive. I'll eventually get the right word typed, responsiveclassroom.org, to make sure that you get that and you can request the chat. I'm not sure if that's something that typically, sometimes in Zoom recordings that are shared, it automatically comes with it, but I'm not usually on the back end of it. So I certainly would encourage you to follow up and ask.
I know in Zoom, you can save it yourself, but in a webinar, it looks like, I don't think there is a way for me to save it myself. So anyway, that's all.
Thanks, Angela.
Deep bow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We're so glad you were here.
All
We're
right.
so glad you're here. Angela, I put a lot of us put our emails in the chat too. If you email me, lindsay.lynch@responsiveclassroom.org, I will see if I can save the chat and send it if that's possible.
Oh, okay. I see your email. Okay. All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Angela.
you so much. Fantastic.
I know we have a question from Kathy, who's been waiting so patiently because she and at least one other person are paraprofessionals. And you know, we devote a whole workshop to you all because of the unique position you have in schools and the unique complexity. So Kathy, I did just unmute you. I'm not sure if you're able to, I think I did. But if anybody has a couple of suggestions, I did a little work as a paraprofessional when I was earning my teaching degree. So that's something I'm happy to speak to as well, but this is a unique time. So I want to turn it over to those who are still in the trenches. And I think specifically, Kathy's question was, if I'm thinking of the right question, when, you know, they're seeing people, I loved your example, Kathy, of putting on false eyelashes, doing cartwheels. Woo.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm in a classroom where my teacher is virtual, remote with half the class, and then we have half the class in the classroom. So with behaviors, it's mostly either SPED IAs or myself that handle those behaviors because she is extremely involved in remote. So I guess I'm looking for some suggestions on how to continually help with the language and the behaviors, because her passion or her things that she's doing now is very involved with the remote piece. I think we're doing a really good job. I just was looking for maybe some extra suggestions. That's all.
Thanks, Kathy. Bridget or
Thank
Amanda.
you. This was a great, I love this. This was awesome.
Well, we're glad you joined us. Before you head out, Dennis, Bridget, or Amanda, have you seen anything in your practices this year during this challenging time and your work with paraprofessionals that might be able to speak to Kathy's question?
Yeah, I think like with our co-teachers, there's sometimes a disconnect between the expectations that are being set from the lead teacher. So I think first off, I think it's going back to the drawing board and redefining what those expectations are for remote learners, all learners. And then I think going back through the interactive modeling and those steps of why I'm modeling this and this is why it's important, and giving students a chance to, what if they notice and they model and you model. I think going back to like that phase, because there's some disconnect on possibly what they know to be true about the expectations. And maybe that step of the modeling was missed, and it's okay to go back and just reset because students need to be reset, particularly right now. That's the advice that I would give, is just go back to what are the most important things that you all you want to see and you need to see, and a fine plan, a tight plan of interactive modeling for those students so that they have clarity on why it's important and why the cartwheel and the eyelashes and all those things aren't going to help them reach their hopes and dreams or whatever their goals are for the classroom. I think they just probably don't understand how that impacts their learning and impacts their meeting their goals.
I appreciate that. I work with an amazing kindergarten teacher. She's awesome. I'm just looking for my part to help more is, I guess, what I'm looking to do. But she's amazing with her, you know, leading and her goals and her, you know what I mean? We're a great team. So she's phenomenal in what she's doing, both, you know, in and out. So, but thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I feel like that just going back to that basic, it is never too late to reset. So you have a really important vantage point as a paraprofessional, and you're seeing kind of the big picture sometimes. And to be able to have the kind of conversation like, I'm seeing this trend of behaviors. I wonder if we can pause and do a quick reset.
Yep.
Because remember, you would do the same thing if students were struggling with reading or math skills.
Right.
And so saying, I'm noticing this set of social emotional skills are really hard right now. It might be time for a reteach. Like it's not a, so
Right.
that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. This was awesome and eye-opening. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Looking to see, I don't see any other hands up. I'm trying to answer the last few questions in the Q&A in case some of these people are still here waiting for me to do that. So
Oh, God, I'm sorry, Michelle.
no, that's okay. I'll continue doing that. But since I don't see hands up for the people that are remaining, there's about 30 some people still here. I would say we can probably bring this to a close in a moment.
I see one question in the chat. I have a few students who need reminders every so often during the day. We are virtual and use Google Meet. Is there a way to give them reminders privately that you know of, or is there a strategy for giving reminders without necessarily saying it outright? Is anybody using Google Meet or familiar with that?
I had this conversation yesterday.
Awesome. Take it away, Amanda.
This is certainly not the only way to do it, but I set up a breakout room and said it was a small group, which it was. But just like Michelle said, just like I would do a small group around an academic skill, this small group was around a social emotional skill. And setting that reminder in place and giving the child a few choices of what they can do to make some improvements. And then they did those improvements today, which was awesome. Something I personally am still trying to figure out the next steps to, especially being an out of classroom teacher, is when I was in school, I could find the kid at the end of the day and say, hey, I really noticed you did this. And that's something I'm still working on. Like, it doesn't feel the same to just type that to them privately in the Google Classroom. So we're going to try another breakout room tomorrow to say, I really see you and I see you making those improvements. Let's keep it going.
Lisa, I'm right there with you. I love to be surrounded by RC teachers too. If anybody else has a question that they'd like our panelists to speak to, I feel like this is just such a rich opportunity. So if you're one of the 25 people still here and you have a wondering, would you raise your hand? Because I'm not sure, maybe your question got lost in the chat and I don't want to miss it.
Right. I think we're good. I think we can officially close. Panelists, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful.
And best of luck to everyone who is in the trenches with this every day, whether it's hybrid, virtual, concurrent, in person, or any of the other things that are new and such a big part of our lives now. Thank you for the work you do. And Lindsay, thank you for your moderation.
Thank
tonight.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Yes.
Take care.
See ya.